Hi everyone, welcome to a new devlog of my game Howling Tales. In this episode, we'll see how I textured Lupo's house and the challenges I encountered when creating the accessories and interior design. So let's get started. As I have explained before, for the creation of the 3D models, I mainly use Blender for the modeling and Substance Painter for the texturing. For me, it's important to communicate part of the story through the textures. Not only because it gives more personality to the models and the game, but also because it helps to explain the story visually. For example, when I textured the house, I thought about how old it was, how it was built, and how the humidity of the forest would affect it by making moss grow on the walls and roof. Since the outside is a dangerous place, I wanted our hero to have a warm and cozy house to come back to after a hard day in the forest. So I made the whole interior out of wood and started designing the interior. One of the main challenges I had with the interior was designing the layout of the spaces. It's a house where two people live. Even though it's a fantasy game and doesn't need to be realistic, I wanted to create a space that was believable. So I started to create everyday elements that we can find in any house, like beds, a kitchen, a table, etc. For that, I simply imagined the life that our hero and his grandmother would have. They would sleep in separate beds, each having their own space. But as the house is small, the spaces would be open. They would have a kitchen where grandma would cook yummy meals, a table to have dinner, and a couch to sit on in front of the fire with a cup of coffee or tea. Just by creating that little context, I could think of dozens of different objects I would need, such as pots, pans, glasses, etc. With the creative part defined, I was presented with a new challenge, this time more technical. Do I create the objects for this house as part of an established design? Or do I create the models independently so I can reuse them in other houses? Reuse is important because it saves me time, so I don't have to create new models, but it's also more efficient because by using the same materials, we reduce the number of dropouts. In my opinion, it's harder to design due to the organization and forecasting all the objects you can need. As this was the first time I was creating a modular environment, I felt a bit overwhelmed and didn't know where to start or how to organize myself. So I started to create the objects at the same time I was designing the interior, which gave me more freedom instead of restraining the design to a collection of pre-made objects. Once I had the interior design, I separated all the unique elements to create a collection. So I just picked one chair, one bottle, etc. And I created only two materials for all of them. One for the opaque models and another one for the glass or transparent models. Once I had the collection done, I went on to reproduce interior design again using those unique elements. I did this in Blender, but I could have done it in Unreal. Then I realized I came up with a workflow that works for me and will help me to create more modular assets for my game in the future. Here, you can see the final result in game. On the other hand, my good friend John from VR Games just released a big update of his flexible combat system asset in the Unreal Marketplace. This week I got a copy and I plan to do some tests to see if I can use it as the main framework for my game. The asset is super complete, from melee, range and magic combat, inventory, loot and many more features. It looks very promising and I'm looking forward to trying it. I'll leave the link in the description in case you want to take a look. And that was all. As always, thank you very much for watching and see you next week.